So Karl Bunch is going to be our first presenter, and I met Karl at an AI event we ran in New York City, where he was one of the most vocal and interesting people we had there. And we knew that we wanted to do something else with Karl, so definitely wanted to have him involved in our meetup. And he's going to give us a really impactful presentation. So thank you, Karl. Go get yourself.
Thanks a lot. I'm not sure if I really need this or not, but that's fine. So, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me without this, or do you need the mic?
It's better for the camera.
Is it better? Oh, for the camera. Sorry about that.
You have a full online audience.
Ah, yes. Okay. Sorry about that. So while he's getting we have all the AI in the world, but we can't figure out how to run PowerPoint. Alexa, please put up my PowerPoint slides. Alexa. Anybody here have an Alexa? Anybody here have a Google Home? Really? Interesting. Do you have both? I do. You have both, right? So the favorite trick that I do, related to everything we talk about here, conversational systems, natural language processing, AI, is I love to ask Alexa a question, and then she gets lost, and I ask the exact same question, same words, to Google Home. And it's kind of frightening, the differences between those two systems. Pay attention here, because there's a lot going on. We're going to talk a little bit right now about adding value in an AI-powered world, but the truth is, a lot of our world is becoming AI-powered, and we actually don't realize it. Everything, when you've been using Google Maps, you've been doing queries against an AI database, and you never even realized you were doing it. Now you're talking to Alexa, and all it's trying to do is figure out what you're saying, how you're saying it, why you're saying it, and then trying to figure out your intention when you're doing the same thing with Google. So let me be clear, it's coming. Don't ignore that fact. The real question is, how much of it's hype, and how much of it's reality, and how can you do something interesting in it? Oh, beautiful. Thank you. So, we're going to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, hype, reality, and hope. We're going to talk about where you can add value, and a real-world example where I did this recently at one of my companies that I work for, and then how do you get started? I think it's really important to start this with, my goal of this speech is to get everybody excited about the opportunity for each and every one of you to participate in this revolution. It is not just for the big boys. Everybody in this room has an opportunity, I guarantee it. And I can prove that because I don't write deep learning algorithms, I don't build systems and sit down all day long and argue about F1 values, and I mean, that's not who I am. But I have built a system that's running millions of dollars worth of media through it and making money today, right? But that's not, so I don't want you to be intimidated by AI. That's the first thing I'd want to say. So, everybody familiar with the Google Deep Learning, Go? Come on, everybody knows this, right? Yeah, all right, seriously. So, the question I have for you is, how many people were scared by that? Anybody? A couple of you? Most of you were kind of like, so what, right? The challenge is that if you look at over time, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, if you look at over time how AI has slowly gotten bigger and bigger and louder, you'll realize that the hype cycle is always the piece that kills AI, every time. And that's one of my concerns actually right now. The Go thing was amazing. It was nothing short of a miracle. Especially the moves it made that seemed almost human. They call it the God move in Go, which is interesting. Those communities are very excited by this. But let me be clear. One of the things that's fascinating about that system is checkers was hard at first, but then they figured that out, chess, and now they're figuring out Go, and there's a lot of other game systems. One of the reasons AI is fairly good at game systems is because you can score them. Now the challenge with Go is it's very difficult to look at a board and immediately say, lose, win. Matter of fact, it's one of the greater traits good players have is for them to realize that they're losing and then they bow out. This is actually a very honorable act in Go. So that was very difficult. I give them major props for that. I'm not underpinning what they did here. But to be clear, they didn't make a machine that tomorrow morning is going to take over the world. What they did is a machine that figured out how to score that and make decisions based on that, and then learn from playing with other players. So I say here, checkers, chess, Go, and that's exclamation point equals is does not equal life, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind. Andrew Ng, you know, amazing young man. You know, I'm completely inspired, but often says interesting things that I completely disagree with. Pretty much anything that a normal person can do in less than 1 second, we can now automate with AI. I'll tell you what, how many people here have walked through Penn Station in the morning? Yeah? Come on, Andrew, come over to New York City. I'm waiting for that day. That's literally what I think about every time I walk through that crowd. I think about how many thoughts and decisions and thoughts and predictions I'm making about what this person's gonna do and that person's gonna do, where all these things are going. Like, all that's going on in my head. And by the way, I'm actually not thinking about it, I'm thinking about it. Because the truth is that whole system's all running without me actually doing anything. So many problems in life are pattern matching problems, right? They're the ability to recognize certain patterns. And actually humans are good at certain types of pattern matching, but we actually fail miserably because so much of it inside of us is heuristic. It's based on emotions, experience, background, things we've done. It's all about survival. If I took a gun out of my pocket right now and shot 3 rounds in the roof, pretty much everybody would drop to the ground except for a combat vet. You would just look at me and go, what are you doing? Right? Because of the difference in experience, right? So, that being said, humans are very powerful at things that computers don't do well. They don't do associations well. One of my favorite things I did for 5 years was work with a bunch of computational linguistics people and we were building an NLP system built on top of a bunch of stuff from CMU. And I used to say all the time when I talk to clients, I used to say to them, this stuff's cool, but let me be clear, it has lots of challenges. One of those challenges is if you said to me, hey, is Devinson back from vacation? And I said, I saw a red Lamborghini in the parking lot. You can make a beeline for Devinson to ask him about his new red Lamborghini, and the computer would be going, I'm sorry, what happened there? You know, my 3-year-old son can figure that out. Think about that. So, humans are really good at that. But we also always tend to project ourselves on things. How many people here have a cat, a dog? You know, you look at it, you think about how, oh, it must love me. No, you die, it will eat you. Prove it. You get stuck in, you get locked that thing in an apartment, it will eat you. But we want to do that because as human beings, one of our greatest capabilities is when I meet a human being on the street, I project myself and can predict numerous of behaviors that I could expect out of that person. If anything, that's why good people get robbed, because they don't expect that behavior, right? But at the end of the day, computers don't deal well with that. We take for granted, however, what comes easy to us, and we project ourselves onto others, other things, other devices. So it's easy for us to project ourselves onto a computer. Hey, computer, you feel sad? No, but my battery's a little low. Oh, okay. Right? I mean, realistically, that's not true, but it's easy for us to do that. So when we hear about AI, the dream, the fantasy, the hope is, oh my gosh, this is going to be something, you know, scary or amazing, but it's going to be an extension of who we are today. And the truth is those systems just aren't that way. We fear artificial intelligence will be as bad to us as we are to others. And that is a good fear. I carry that fear. Nuclear bombs are an example of that fear, right? AI is probably not going to be much different. So, talking about the hype cycle, everybody here's seen this, I'm sure, the Gartner hype cycle. This is 2017. You can't quite read it here, but it doesn't matter. It's just gobbledygook anyways. And the reason I show this is that when you think about hype, oh, actually, we'll talk about that in a minute. When you think about hype, they always show, Gartner shows it kind of like, here's where it gets big, and then then it kind of, then the despair, the trough of despair or disillusionment, and then it plateaus out, right? Which is a fantastic way to talk to clients because you want them to come back every year and hear the story, right? And that's what they do. They're brilliant people and they think about these things. But I'm going to talk in a minute about how I think that's a fallacy. So, the reality of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence started in 1956. It actually started before then. Plato was probably thinking about it. But at the end of the day, it has cycled every 7 to 10 years. I've lived through several of these cycles, much to my own disillusionment and loss of much money. But at the same time, there is a thing that's happening, something changing. I didn't put it on this slide, but one of the things that's happening is that AI thrives on big data. It thrives on computational power. It thrives on connectivity. and being able to get information from all kinds of places. It thrives on things being labeled. You show an AI 50,000 cat videos, shock, surprise, it's gonna pick cats out. Now, the difference is I could show my son 2 cats and a dog, and for the rest of his life, he'll know that was 2 cats and a dog. So, you know, there's a little difference there still, but it's important. So I tell people often, it's last decade was the decade of big data. This decade is about what do we do with that big data, right? It overwhelmed us. I mean, there's nobody in this room who actually can understand what a zettabyte is. I mean, we can all talk about it mathematically. I have built systems that I remember when I deployed my first terabyte system and it cost my customer $600,000 and I thought it was amazing. And I mean, I do all these things all the time, but the truth is I can't even fathom this stuff, right? So there's so much data, there's no way the humans can actually work with it. At the end of the day, we needed computers to help us with that. All of a sudden we had that ability. Investments in AI at scale around specific capabilities, things like image processing, speech recognition, you know, spatial analysis, logistics, all of those things are very important. And you can create strengths in those individual silos, but you can't necessarily create strengths that are all joined together. You don't see very many systems where, you know, like right now there's, I also have an Amazon Play. Yes, I'm a nerd. I have like all the toys. But you know, the Amazon Play has a camera. Like I should be able to look at it and it should look at me and go, oh, you're sad, Carl. What can I do for you? I want more chocolate cake, Alexa. You know, but it can't do that yet, right? The human brain is not one thing. I know that we all get taught this, but we forget because you live your life every day and you get up in the morning and all you see is this ugly mug while you're shaving, at least for us guys. You know, and you know, the ladies are doing their hair. You're not really looking at the components of who you are. You have a visual system, an auditory system, you have emotional systems, you have your id, your ego, you have all these amazing, fascinating things going on inside you. And meanwhile, the damn thing's keeping your heart running the whole time and making you breathe, right? Like there's a lot of those systems in there. So we keep trying to say AI, I love this is a quote some guy said, he said AI is whatever it is we can't achieve today. And once we achieve it, it's no longer AI, right? Like they used to think the systems and algorithms to build airplane logistics for all the flights, right? Where the flights should go and when should they go, they thought that was AI. All of us think it's boring. It pisses us off when it rains in Chicago and we can't get our connecting flight. Never mind how much mind-boggling technology was behind making those decisions. So when you think about that, as more AI subsystems become bonded together, as they start interacting and working together, that's when you want to start thinking about, wow, there's an interesting thing starting to happen now. And I believe we're going to start seeing these things very soon. I have some thoughts about what's going to happen in my own industry and media, and I believe we'll see it in other parts of the world. So, the reality of AI is it's here, it's growing. I do not have any fear for my job tomorrow morning. I do believe my grandchildren have something to think about. And my grandkids are 3 and 5 years old, so they're never going to drive a car, right? Let's be honest, right? There's a whole different world. So I love this quote by Isaac Newton, which was stolen from you know, many ancient historical people also. But if I have ever seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants, right? When you think about this, what I don't like about the Gartner chart is this is just 4 years. What they really should be showing you is, oh look, and by the way, and oh by the way. Plot that over 10 years. Plot that over 30 years. My first computer had 4K of memory in it, and I thought when I got the upgrade to 16, I would never use all that. What would you use 16K for? So to be clear, we're constantly, the problem we have as humans is we're steeped in the day-to-day. Like we're not at all amazed by this little device here. Like a couple of years ago, it would have been a monster. I have one of those monster cameras. We're not, because you just get used to it, right? But if you look back in time to 1956, and then you look where the world is now, these amplitudes are getting bigger and bigger every single time. So, the hope. Humans are amazing in so many ways, but we're really bad at a lot of stuff. We're not really good at math. Some of the best and brightest think they are, but they're okay at it compared to computers. Logic gets blurred by emotion or by us being distracted by things. You know, our memory is compressed by heuristics that we don't understand. Like, you tell yourself you remember the day you're married to your first wife, or the day your daughter was born. That is all bullshit. It's been compressed. All of the data has been destroyed. All that is kept in your mind is such a small little fragment of that thing, enough, and your mind will lie to you constantly about that recall. Meanwhile, computers are amazing, right? They compute at speed, and they do logic at speed. And once you figure something out with a computer, it does it over and over and over and over and over again, right? Also, they can store massive amounts of information. They don't know what to do with that information. They don't know how to interpret it. And that's what this particular decade is about, is figuring out how to help those systems interpret that data, and hopefully in a positive way towards humankind. They have no clue about emotions. They have no idea about pre-exposures to problems. If you throw a computer at a new problem, they're dead. You take a human being, I don't know if any of you have done this thing where you go to these escape things, where you go in and they drop you in a room and they lock you in a room and you can't get out until you figure out all the clues. Let me be clear, like computers would just be sitting there going, Watson, where are you? I'm scared. I mean, if it had emotions. But right, I mean, like computers don't have that ability yet to just solve all those random problems that humans can do. So my hope is the computers and humans will be able to work together. I think the greatest thing I heard, actually, I was watching a video today about this, were the guys who wrote the second machine wave. The thing I like about it is he said, computers can't decide how technology will be applied yet. It's up for us to do that. So we should be proactive about that and think about that and find ways to apply technology in computers. So, how can you apply artificial intelligence to your business problems? Let's talk a little bit about it. Anybody that's ever been around me is laughing down in the audience. Devinson will look up and see this. There's a couple people who've seen it. I always talk about this because I think it's important. Don't build a nuclear power plant when you can sell Christmas trees, right? There's more value add in creativity and the ability to solve very specific problems than there is in the large monster play. I mean, don't get me wrong, buy Amazon stock, should have done it a while ago. But at the same time, Amazon, Apple, and Facebook, and Google are all building this stuff. So this scares people. I don't know how many people here feel like they probably come to this speech thinking, there's really no way I could do anything with AI. I mean, I don't have 15,000 engineers, and I don't have all it. Yeah, you're right, that's kind of scary, but they're focused on very specific things. They have large hardware, data, skills. It's hard to compete with them, but they're focused on a big play. And they often miss the forest for the trees. They don't necessarily see what you see every day. Why does Google buy, I don't even know the number anymore, but they used to buy like one a week, right? Why do they buy these companies all the time? Because somebody smart, like one of you people in this audience, found something interesting and found a way to solve that problem in a unique way that they realized would add value to their overall ecosystem, and they buy them up instantly. So there's definitely opportunities to create that at scale. Creativity is key. To me, I don't want to build nuclear power plants. They're not fun. I have built them, and it really is fun for a while, and then you get gray hair and you move on. What you really want to do is do things where you can solve problems. What do you see that others don't see? What is the version of the universe or your world that you don't know, or that nobody else knows? What you can take advantage of this, know your market best. Who are the people? Who are the problems? What are you trying to solve, right? These are the things you have to think about. Bring your vision, talent, and skills, and most importantly, and I'll talk about this in a minute here, solve real problems. Do not accept anybody who comes to you and says, we need to do something with AI really quick. My board of directors told me we need to do something with AI. Like, great, I don't want to talk to you. Talk to me about a problem. What are we trying to solve? How are we going to solve it? Comes second. So, a real world example of this, the problem at Xaxis. Xaxis, probably most of you don't know, we're a billion-dollar media company that some people would know if you're in the game. We're owned by WPP. We have 25% year-over-year growth, 46 countries, $1 billion in revenues, 2,000 employees. Our media traders were overwhelmed. These are the people logging in every day, banging on keyboards and using Excel to try to deliver on these campaigns and get people to buy plane tickets and cruise trips, right? And that's really been very difficult. The demand-side platforms, all the systems that were designed around this, are very generic. Their optimizations were designed to solve millions of people's problems, not a single person's problem. Remember this conversation about forests and trees? So there's opportunity here because their systems are designed in that way. So we decided we would build something we called CoPilot. Now there's a lot of very important things to realize in this strategy, and it is a strategy that I will continue to outline. Number one, CoPilot doesn't sound very scary. Matter of fact, we have a logo. I should have put his logo. The original logo is the guy, like, he's like a cartoon. He's got a little flying thing, and he's like, I mean, he's so cute. Like, he's not scary. Number one, we wanted to automate the menial tasks away. Take the pain away from people, make it easier for them, make them have a better job. We also felt like we should leverage heuristic knowledge in humans. Humans actually are amazing at a lot of things, not necessarily calculation, but very good at understanding the difference between a campaign to get somebody to drive a car and a campaign to get somebody to get in an Uber. You know, I mean, they're kind of two different things, selling a car versus being able to jump in an Uber, right? The other thing is, we felt like it should be important for us to give our traders more time to think. Matter of fact, I call this one of my trademark statements. I say it all the time. The systems should be designed for humans to have more time to think, to be more strategic, to think about what it is that is the outcome that my client wants to get out of this, and then spend time on that. Not in an Excel spreadsheet sorting by some column. That's horrifying. The other thing is, we had to think about the positioning of this thing. I talk about this later, but it's really important, whatever you do, if you're doing an entrepreneurial project, it's a little different, but not a lot, because then you have to deal with investors. But if you're doing an entrepreneurial project where you're working on inside, you're trying to transform a business from the inside, you can't scare the crap out of the troops. You need to give people a chance to understand where they're at. So traders will, the way we positioned it is they will evolve to be drone pilots. They're going to be these really brilliant people that have all these systems at their command. We're going to partner with them on a day-to-day basis and make their life better. And they will be respected for their understanding of what the computers cannot understand, right? So the whole goal of this is we wanted to make a system that accentuated the human, but made their lives better, and at the same time made them more successful, right? So I'm not going to go through all the details here. But essentially, this is a data pipeline. There's a thing that happens, there's an event, there's information, it comes across, we pick different engines, we use that, we build models, we output the models, right? You have a data scientist and you have an engineer in this particular picture. The first thing to learn from this picture is, what did I do here? I put the people in it. Don't forget the people, right? When you're talking internally, you're scaring people when you talk about computers and when you talk about AI. I have built systems in my life that have put people out of business, and I'm sad for those people. And all I know is you have to be sensitive to that fact that you could be doing that. Number two, give people some kind of visualization so they can understand it. This stuff's really complicated. Don't make it hard for them. Give them something they can hang their hat on. Then the second thing we did is we said, all right, we need a system that looks kind of like this. Where can we add value? We can have data scientists that are amazing. We can have engineers that are amazing. We can map the data. We can choose what kinds of engines we're going to do. We can do all these things. We were very clear with ourselves about what we could do. And you know what else we were clear with ourselves? What we can't do, right? I love math. I love computers. I love science. I have some data science. One of my data scientists literally found the Higgs boson. She was on that project. She's a brilliant young lady. Neither one of us, me or her, are going to build the next cool deep learning algorithm, the next logistic regression algorithm. We're not going to do it. We don't have enough people, and it doesn't add enough value. It's like me deciding to build a subway so I can get to downtown to go to the meeting. It makes no sense. Let somebody else do those things. So we focused on the places we couldn't go, and we were very explicit to ourselves about the things we couldn't do. And I think that's important. When you're trying to figure out a way to innovate, you need to be very clear on these topics. So, how do you get started? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I know we've all heard this, but it really is important, especially when it comes to this. Do not let AI intimidate you. It is like any other topic you've learned in your life. It is just another topic. It's like learning French or anything else. It's probably easier than learning French. Matter of fact, I guarantee it. So, don't start with a solution, start with a problem. What problems do you see around you? What's happening in your business? What's happening in your market? What are the things you think need to be fixed in the world? And then I challenge you to learn that. Eat, drink, sleep, know it like an expert. Be an expert. One of the things I did was stole a couple people from people who used to run trading teams, people who knew how to optimize campaigns. You just need to have as much expertise as possible. You need less data science, less engineers, a lot of expertise on what the real problems are and how people solve them today. And then you can start mapping that out. What's the smallest version of what you want to do that you could do? Cut it until it hurts, and then just cut it again. The smallest possible thing you can do. We were literally sending Excel spreadsheets to the DSPs instead of nice JSON files. Who cares? They ran them, the campaigns got better, we fixed the pipeline later. But you do need to focus on how are we going to do that. Walk through the process today. What does everyone do, right? Are there pattern matching problems? Are there things we know that AI is really good at? If there are, man, take those pieces and attack them with vigor and try to figure out how those things power people in the process to be more successful, right? Are there big data problems? If there are, figure it out, get the data together, get it cleaned up. Personally, the most important thing I think the next couple of years of any career is going to be around this is going to be around understanding how to get data, to clean it, and make it edible for the poor little system that has to eat it. Any of you have raised children, you cooked kids food for a long time, and if you're lucky, at some point you convinced them how to cook you dinner once in a while. I haven't gotten to that stage yet. All my kids moved out, still don't cook for me. But the point is, you need to think about this thing as what's the problem, how can we break it down, what are the littlest things we can do, and then how do we get the data, and how do we get the problem solved. Move fast and break things. I love this XKCD. He's like, move fast and break things. Jobs have been fired from, FedEx driver. You know, all kinds of cool things, crane operator. But what unique data do you have available to you? What can you do in your market that's different than your competitors? What do you have that you can leverage that nobody else is leveraging? What magic would you like the process to make more effective? Leverage human heuristics, don't forget that. Also, leverage machine insights in those human heuristics. One of the reasons I use the word magic here, usually, and I'm a deep technologist, so it makes me a little nauseous to say that word, is that one of my favorite Isaac Asimov quotes is he says, sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So I would argue for a minute, while you're trying to solve problems, let magic exist in your solutioning, and then reverse it back to the sufficiently advanced technology to solve that problem. Define the smallest thing you can hack, prove the value to you and your team, prove it to yourself, prove it to your team first. Try really hard not to get anybody else in that conversation if you can. Then communicate that value to others. Now, this is the most important thing. Has anybody noticed how far I'm into this talk and I haven't talked about data science, what algorithm you use, math, JSON, protobufs? We can talk about that at the lunch or the break afterwards. But let me be clear, none of it's important. What's important is fear of change is real. Make sure people know how they fit into your future vision. Even if you don't know, you can lie a little bit. But just tell them there is a version of the world where they get to play. Because if they don't, they will resist you and you will die. Under, commit, over, deliver. I mean, this is an axiom that is so important in AI because your CEO and his board members and everybody around him are sitting at the tennis court after drinking a little brandy and smoking a cigar, and they're going, so what are you doing around AI? I mean, come on, right? I mean, you've got to resist the danger of telling them we're doing something amazing, right? Get executive buy-in, but get the freedom to hide in a corner of the office, and I mean hide. Don't announce it to a bunch of people. Don't make some big, huge, honest, we're going to transform the universe because we're building Claire or whatever the heck you're doing. Fight the hype. It will kill your project before it gets started. You will never be successful if you don't fight the hype. Push back on fear. Make it small so nobody really notices the thing you're building. Make it be like, don't worry about that, George. You're always going to have a job because we have this thing going on. The truth is, George might transform his job in the future, or he might not. You don't know, so don't let him get too worried about it. Make a scorecard, and only put easy things on it. people from Xaxis, don't tell my boss. Shh. What I always talk about is there's what I call hard commits to the business and soft commits. The soft commits are the thing me and my team have decided we're going to build because we know that's what needs to actually happen. And some of them are really scary hard, and we frankly don't want to commit it to the business because frankly, they won't understand it, and if we slip a quarter, then they're going to shut us down. So you have to balance that. It's hard. I'm not saying lie. Maybe just be careful about what you're saying publicly. Maybe to the key executives you're talking to them about the hard things. Meanwhile, update that scorecard and keep them up to date. Let everybody know what's working and what's not working. The more they understand that, the more they're going to give you space to be able to continue going on it. This is the most important quote of the whole deck. Perfection is the enemy of progress. I know normally it's like differently quoted. I like the way Winston says this because it's very important. You're not going to have success if you're worried about making every step of the pipeline perfect. I promise you. We built CoPilot in a series of, well, let's see, we started in November of 2015, launched in February 2016, so that was, what, 4 or 5 months, and literally, it was horrifying underneath the covers, but it worked, people enjoyed using it, it started making money, and then we actually redesigned the entire thing. Look out for second system syndrome, please be very careful about second system syndrome, look that up. But don't let perfection hold you down. Solve problems, real problems today, quickly, and try to move forward. And that is it.
If you have time to answer just a couple questions,
yeah.
if you like. Sure.
Sure, I just didn't know what timing was for everybody else.
Good.
Questions? Yes, go ahead.
What happens when AI fails?
Well, that's a big question. There's two sides to it. One of them is, what happens when AI fails and it kills somebody? And it's actually something I wrote a post about recently, and I didn't publish it because it may be a little uncomfortable. But when you think about it, there's an adage, we've all heard Andreessen say, software is going to eat the world, right? Well, I got bad news for you. Software and hardware are now becoming kind of the same thing. And now all of a sudden they're going to start driving 18-wheelers. I really don't care much about the cars. But there's going to be failures. So that's one question. I don't know the answer to that, but it is a big problem. The second problem is, what if it fails actually in a way that makes me sadder than that, which is people feel like they set their expectations here, we fail to meet that expectation, and then they give up. And that's what's happened every 10 years, like a clock. Go read about it. It's a great Wikipedia article about that history. Like, they overpromised, everybody tried to build into it, it didn't work, failed. So, I don't know the answer to that.
Don't you think we ought to be doing some thinking about that?
Yeah, lots of people are. I mean, I think about it a lot too, but I mean, other people are way smarter than me think about it constantly. Other questions?
Getting back to the perfection quote by Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
Now, do you think that the not going for perfection when you're inside a corporation, a big corp, and like coming up with something that's going to work and solve a specific problem and then like expand on it may work in that space? But if you're like building something in an entrepreneurial level, like Steve Jobs and the iPhone, which had to be perfect when it came out, and it had to be, magic, like you said before, is really what you need to do if you're presenting something that's going to be exponentially different.
So what you don't know about me is I spent 25 years building companies from scratch.
Well, there you go. And how did you do that?
I avoided perfection wherever I could. Right. I mean, you need to think about. I mean, nowadays Silicon Valley nerds will say, "Ooh, fail fast, break things." What? I don't give a shit. Nothing was born when I was doing that. The reality is that what I mean by perfection is if you're trying to polish it too far, and it's a big difference between what Steve Jobs was trying to do with all the people in the world, and if you don't think they did about 50 other things like the iPod and all the other things, those are all horrible. But they learned from them, and then when they came out with that one, that was actually version 5, if you think about it, of all the things they did before that. Other questions? We have time, or we're good?
Sure, one more.
Forgive me, I'm sorry. Forgive me if I get this wrong.
No, go for it.
You made a comment that sounded like the the epiphany of AI is when you have all these various AI systems can finally talk together in the way that so if you can expand a little bit what you think as the epiphany of AI and when it no longer is AI.
Yeah, well, first of all, what we're doing isn't AI in my religion, but we're not here to talk about religion. Amen, can I get an amen? I'm sorry. But seriously, this isn't AI. It's machine learning, and we're doing a lot of cool stuff with it, and the Go thing, that isn't AI. But that's why we invented a new term called general AI. Don't you love the way humans think when they decide they want to come up with a new thing? They just wait till the computers figure that out. But to your point, what I'm trying to say is where AI will get closer to general AI is as these systems figure out how to cooperate, much like a human mind does, and they're able to bridge those gaps, right? And crazy people like Elon, I mean, I'm almost quit everything and moved to San Francisco to go do the thing with the Neuralink thing. I'm still kind of debating on it since I'm currently in transition. That wasn't public, but whatever. The reality is that those kinds of interactions, when we have the ability either for humans to have a neural level interaction with AI and all the systems in it are then augmenting, I think you'll see it's just like hockey stick. The scary thing is, right now, you would say we're in a hockey stick, and I would say we're at the very bottom of it. Like we just went beep, just a quarter of an inch. Think about that. This is a gold mine. Now, when there's a gold rush, there are two people that make money. The people who get in and get all the gold that's there as quickly as they can, and the people selling the shovels. Don't forget that. Now, Amazon, Google, I don't know what the heck Facebook's doing. If anybody knows here, take me aside, please. I'd love to talk to you about that. But I mean, these guys are going to build systems that you and I can use, the OpenAI initiative, right, that we can use they're going to sell us shovels, right? And at the end of the day, I'm okay buying shovels if I get to take the first 50 metric tons of gold. I'm all right with that. But just be aware of that fact, that people are going to sell you shovels, and you can use those, but at the same time be aware that what side of that do you want to be on. Anyways, with that, thank you. I'll be here afterwards and we will talk to you.
Thank you, Karl. You gave a sort of executive version of Intro to AI. So I don't have to sort of introduce any concepts here because you covered just about everything. And in fact, tonight, I'm only going to focus in on one little area that Karl said was important, and that is dealing with the fear in order to convince people of whatever it is that you are building, want to build, selling, whatever idea you want to get funded. Whenever you want to try and accomplish something, you do have to convince people. You do have to go out there and sell. And in order to sell, you have to deal with fear, as Karl said. So that's what I'm going to focus on mostly today. I'm going to draw a lot on my experience as an entrepreneur, selling ideas to investors, as well as inside of EY. So for that, just a little bit of background to add to what Adelyn said. I am a serial entrepreneur. And for those of you who say serial entrepreneur, Ernst & Young, what's up with that? It doesn't really jive. I hear you. I kind of agree with you. The fact of the matter is, Ernst & Young bought the last thing that I was running. So that's how I wound up there. I was running a company called TaxChat. In fact, Adelyn helped a great deal with making TaxChat successful, and Ernst & Young went ahead and bought it. So that's how I wound up there. But once I got to Ernst & Young, I actually started working on emerging technologies. So a lot with artificial intelligence and a lot with blockchain. Blockchain, of course, makes sense because that's a distributed ledger. We're a bunch of accountants, so you better know what the heck blockchain is as a bunch of accountants. So, and in getting involved with these technologies, we did commit a sin on the face of it, as Karl would point out, right? We started looking at emerging technologies not with a problem in mind necessarily. Right? We do have a portion of our business that looks at business problems and figures out whatever technology, whatever solution is necessary to solve that business problem. But with so many emerging technologies arising out there, we also needed to be sure that no matter what, we were familiar with these technologies. So I run something called Foundry Labs, where we immerse ourselves in the actual technology, artificial intelligence, natural language processing, natural language generation, machine learning, Q&A systems, in order to figure out how we can use understand these technologies at the root of it, and then start to understand our business and see where there might be some overlap. So it is a little bit of a sin. Granted, you should not be doing AI for AI's sake. You should not be doing it because the board of directors says, I want to do AI. But you should, or you might need to, depending on your business, be familiar with the technology so that you can make good decisions about whether it's a good idea or not. So that's where my background has started, and that's what has run me headlong with the sort of idea of this talk, which is how do you convince people about these new technologies when it presents an existential threat to their business, right? And that is very much how I wound up here. With this particular topic is at EY, we're talking about an existential threat. There's a lot of fear. Now, why is there that fear, right? There's a lot of reasons why there's fear. One group of people are afraid because they think that this is actually going to change their business. Are they right? Who knows right now, but some people think it's going to change their business. There's another group of people who are kind of afraid machines are the next thing to be afraid of because we're in the 7th season of Walking Dead and zombies are a little bit tiring now, right? So there's another group that is actually not concerned that AI is going to take over the world, but it is going to affect their particular business, right? And in our world, in accounting, in tax preparation, we fall very squarely into this. Who has seen the site Will Robots Take My Job? Has anyone seen it? So willrobotstakemyjob.com. It's a very funny site. What you can do is you go in there and you put in your job, and it's based off of the standard occupational codes. You put in your job. And so if you put in accounting and auditors, right? Accounting auditors, you're doomed, right? 94% probability of automation. It is a rules-based business, and computers are very good with rules. So accountants and auditors, right, they're flipping out. They're absolutely flipping out. Now, I myself am in the vertical of EY that is called America's Tax, right? So we are the tax group. That's different than the auditors that audit books, different than advisors, sort of the equivalent of Accenture. We're in tax. So, this is accountants and auditors. What if you put in tax preparers? Right? Seriously, this is why people are flipping out. And this is also why when the tech guy, when the AI guy walks in with his hoodie, he might as well just have a scythe along with it because he looks like the Grim Reaper. And it's just ridiculous. So they're not really very welcoming to me and my ideas because of this, right? So, all jesting aside, we have to start to figure out what their fears are and what results in their fears. So I'm going to break down this portion of the conversation by first talking about broadly what are fears out there, and then I'll get a little bit more narrow to specifically what happens in our business. But I want to start broadly because not everybody is selling to or pitching to a service industry. They're just pitching to more general audiences. So with that, let's talk about the macro fears. One of the first macro fear is what is called the lump of labor fallacy. Right? So people believe that there is a lump of labor, a lump of jobs, and that if a machine comes and does some of those jobs, there will be less jobs left over. Right? Now, it is called the lump of labor fallacy because there's a economist back in the 1800s, David Schloss, who examined this issue and said that that is not the case. There is not a finite pool of labor, and that when you have automation and things of that sort, you actually free up labor to do other jobs, right? So that lump of labor fallacy exists. People think that there's a finite number of jobs, and a robot comes in and takes some jobs, AI comes in and takes some jobs, that's less for humans, and that's just not the case. So if that is the fear you're dealing with, know that and start to address it. There's the fixed goods assumption, which is kind of the opposite side of the lump of labor fallacy, which is there is a finite number of goods that will be consumed, right? And I saw a perfect example of why this is not true just earlier this week in the Wall Street Journal, when they were talking about various different technologies that are out there. And the stat that was very interesting was that with the rise of ride-sharing apps and ride services and so on, what happened in the marketplace here in New York? Well, over the last 2 years, there have been 75,000 less taxi rides, right? 75,000 less. So that kind of goes to the fixed good assumption that if there's some efficiencies, we're going to reduce somewhere. However, there's been 210,000 more Uber and Lyft rides. So the pie actually got bigger. So this fixed good assumption is not a good assumption. And so if people are concerned that there's only a finite number of fixed goods that are going to be made out there, and if a machine can make those goods in half the time, then jobs will go away, you can say very objectively, mathematically, that that's not the case. There's the issue of muscle tasks versus mental tasks. Right? I think that people, when they think about the Industrial Revolution, when they think about cars replacing horses, there's one sort of idea they have in their head, right? That we're replacing the tasks that are physical labor. But the domain of intelligence, the domain of mental tasks, has always been the domain of humans, always. And it's not like a machine is going to take that over until now, right? So if that happens to be the issue that people are facing, you can start to have the same conversations that you do with the fixed goods fallacy, the lump of legacy fallacy, which is, no, in fact, you can work hand in hand with machines and actually produce more goods, have more free time, produce more value, more GDP, because that's what the numbers show. There's people who are seeing issues, and Bill Gates himself has suggested that the coming of robots can be dealt with by just taxing robots and sort of redistributing the wealth, because robots are coming in and taking the jobs. And I think that while there may be some validity to this idea on a socioeconomic level, on dealing with social issues, on dealing with the differences between the haves and the have-nots, in dealing with how you pay for things like healthcare and so on, maybe. But when we talk about it like this, it just leaves the idea that, hey, the robots are just coming in and wipe out jobs, and we just have to tax the robot and pay the person that lost their job. So that sort of idea starts to give people a fearful posture. And I think that it is the wrong one to take. It's the wrong idea to take from this. What this is doing is dealing with social ramifications that are here today anyway. If you look at the healthcare debate, you know we have it here anyway. President Obama, on his way out, actually sort of issued a warning that said, hey, listen, the pace of change that is coming from technology is going to be so fast and so rapid that people are going to be affected. So that sort of warning definitely causes people to feel fearful. And of course, we all know that Elon Musk is scaring the bejesus out of us, right? Saying that AI is going to be dropping bombs on our head. So all of these things are general reasons why people get fearful. But more specifically, as you get into the service world, and it doesn't necessarily only apply to the service world, there are some very real and immediate things. First and foremost, in our world, in the service world, we bill on time and materials, right? So if we put 1,000 people out in the field and bill them 8 hours a day, and then all of a sudden we have a machine that can do that job in half the time with half that labor, what the heck are we going to bill, right? So there's a time and materials problem. And this needs to start to be dealt with in a value pricing model. So when you talk to people about this, if you're billing time and materials and you spend half the time of human labor, then yes, you're going to have a revenue problem. But if you are solving the same problem you always have, just faster, probably more accurately by using machines, then you need to learn how to value price your product. And that is how you can start to deal with this issue. And if you do it and do it well, you will also wind up with more margin, because your cost of goods will go down, but your revenue won't go down quite as much. So that is important. The other thing that you will do is defend against the kid in the garage who's figuring out how to put out of work all of your service folks, because it's going to happen. If you've got something that can get commoditized, it will get commoditized, and you might as well be at the front end of it. You might as well be Netflix, not Blockbuster, when disruption happens. So that's why you got to get in the game and start playing with it, and that's what you have to communicate to people who are fearful and say, you can't take away my revenue. There's a utilization problem, right? In the service industry, people are the product, and those people need to be billed at a certain percentage in order for them to cover the cost of their salary, right? And so if you bring in machines and start to do jobs quicker, people are fearful that they will have a utilization problem. They will no longer be billing their people out at the right level, and that leads to all sorts of problems. So dealing with that issue is going to be very important as to how you either repurpose those folks into more strategic type jobs, or deal with the very real discussion of reductions in force. Right? And that is a reality. As Karl said, sometimes that will happen. Now those people, and we'll talk about this a little bit later with some statistics, those people are out of that particular job, but the pie of jobs is still growing. We'll talk about that in a bit. So it is not like we just terminated somebody's ability to make a living forevermore. The shrinking empire issue. Lots of people measure their worth in any business by how many people they command, right? How many people are in their charge. And so dealing with the shrinking empire issue is definitely something that you have to think about. And the way we counter it most is dealing with the growing P&L, right? The growing P&L trumps the shrinking body count that is under your command. So if people are fearful, they won't always tell you that they're worried that they will have 50 people under their charge rather than 100. But if you know that that idea is an idea in people's heads, you can be proactive in addressing that. So the false savings, right? In our business, people are our cost of goods, right? If we walk in and say, we're going to take this particular process over here, and we're going to allow you to do it with half the people, half the man hours, then we make the case that you will have a more profitable business line there. Now the reality is, when the business looks at their entire business, they see the people as a cost of goods, and unless those people shrink, right, there is no savings, right? The cost of goods remain the same. Utilization went down, but the cost of goods remain the same. So when you talk about margin improvement, when you're selling an idea to somebody and they roll their eyes, it's very possible that they're rolling their eyes because they know there's a false savings there, because they're not going to fire anybody because they need those people for other jobs elsewhere and they can't afford to lose them, or they're not willing to. So when you see the rolled eyes, that could be what's going on. There's, of course, the risk of the unknown. Everybody's afraid of that, and particularly in the accounting and auditing business, when people come to us and employ Ernst & Young, they are often employing us not for the work that we do as much as we are insurance. We are very much insurance. When a public company submits their numbers to the street, they can say it was audited by Ernst & Young, or PwC, or Deloitte, or whomever it is. And if there's any problem along the way, right, we wear it, right? It is on us. We are an insurance policy on people's books. So if we're going to let computers do certain tasks rather than humans, that is a very scary thing if you don't understand very deeply what job the computer is doing. Understanding how a computer comes to its decisions is very difficult. And I'm sure myself, Karl, could talk a whole nother speech on the issues of transparency in machine learning and artificial intelligence systems, and how it is essential and a huge risk in building these systems. So risk of the unknown, and then of course the fear of wasting time. We are selling our hours in this business, And anything that we build in order to try and make our job better has to happen on nights and weekends effectively, because we got to be billing out during the day. So there's a fear of wasting time and failing in building these things. So if you are talking to folks and you see them hesitant, this may be the reason as well. So those are some of the specific reasons. Now let's get to some facts and realities about the world that will help you in having the discussion with folks as you find them being resistant for one reason or another. First and foremost, really simple. We've had 86 months of straight non-farm job growth, right? 86 months. Anybody who is reading headlines and talking about people being put out of work right now are not recognizing that more people are employed, there are more jobs, and there have been every month for 86 straight months. So that's not to say that there won't be a time when taxi drivers are put out of work on a larger scale basis. But it is to say that that apocalyptic prediction is certainly not here today, not by any stretch of the imagination. It could be partly because, as Karl said, we're only 1 inch up that hockey stick, right? And as we go up that hockey stick, it may get to be a bigger and bigger issue, and we may have to start to think about social impacts of that. But we're not there right now, so everybody can take a deep breath. There's a thing called occupational churn, and occupational churn is a measure of how many jobs in a particular market disappear versus jobs in a new market that appear. And it is a little bit different than the stat I gave you about taxis and Uber, but it's the same idea. When taxis go down, Uber going up, that's a measure of churn in the taxi business, right? So it wouldn't be in this number because that's all in the taxi business. It would be more like, you know, the reduction in household servants and the increase in automobile, you know, makers, right, and people in the automotive industry, right? Two totally separate things. And right now, the occupational churn for the last 20 years is lower than any time it's been from 1850 to 2000, right? So that idea that we're churning jobs right now, it's not happening, right? We, of course, everybody knows that used to be 95% of the world were farmers, and now it's down to 2%, right? You can rightfully say, but Steve, that was over a long period of time. People had time to absorb that change. You're absolutely right. This was over a long period of time. However, McKinsey Global Institute has said that while 50% of the tasks or activities out there can be taken by machines or can be replaced by machines, only about 5% of the jobs can. Because, once again, machines are replacing single activities, not whole jobs. Machines learn checkers, and then chess, and then go. They don't learn how to engage a strategic battle in the hills of Afghanistan, right? That's a totally different thing. So it is certain activities that are being made more effective and helped by machines, not whole jobs. So these are some of the facts. On top of the facts, there are governors, there are brakes in the system that will stop any kind of runaway apocalyptic change. And this is another thing that you can use to convince whomever you are talking to that they need not worry as much. First and foremost, the cost, right? The cost of churning to this new world that everybody talks about is pretty steep. If we just took the trucking industry, right? Just the trucking industry and said, hey, all the truckers are going to be wiped out. All of them. 1.7 million truckers, or whatever the number is, about that. They're going to be wiped out, right? You need $1 trillion+ of new trucks and retrofit in order to wipe out all those truckers. Who's going to come up with $1 trillion to instantly roll over all the trucks, right? So there's a cost governor to what's going on here. There's a regulation governor. Right now, you're not allowed to have any trucks on the road. Yes, there is a couple tests going on. There's some tests where they've delivered beer, you know, in LA, but that was a test. No business is regularly delivering, you know, anything with trucks because it's not allowed. There is a legal governor to what's going on here. And of course, there's societal acceptance, right? Grandpop is not getting in a driverless car tomorrow. No way, no how. It's just not going to happen. So, with all that, let's talk about what do you do? What emotions do you pull on when you want to sell? How do you get to the selling? And there are two fundamental things to play on when selling AI stuff. These are the things that I use in my business internally at EY when I try and get people enthusiastic. And it is things that I have used in the past when talking to investors to invest in, in any ideas that we have. And the first one is greed. Straight out greed, right? Those of you who remember way back the Wall Street movie with Michael Douglas, greed is good, right? People want money, right? And greed is something that you can speak to. You don't have to speak to it so crassly as to call it greed, but you can speak to it, and mainly when it comes to AI, in the form of revenue and margin, right? And I submit that probably margin is going to be the first thing that you are going to be able to speak to with any idea that you come up with, because there is going to be many things that you can improve, and those improvements will save time, save energy, save money, and that will save margin in somebody's business. So in our case, we are currently building something called an intelligent classifier, right? And the job of this intelligent classifier is to use machine learning and to look at historical transactions that our EY professionals have classified in the past. An easy example is meals and entertainment transactions, right? A meals and entertainment transaction is either 50% deductible or 100% deductible, right? And so we have millions of transactions where EY professionals have made that determination, which means we have a set of data that holds EY knowledge. And if we feed that to a computer, that computer can figure out that here's the ones that are 50% deductible, here's the ones that are 100% deductible. A structured batch process machine learning drill. And once the computer figures that out, we can then feed it transactions going forward that aren't labeled, and the computer can figure it out. So in one practice, we were able to wipe out 60 man-weeks of work per month, instantly, right? Now I say instantly, we had to build the thing first, but once it was built and trained, right? Going forward, it takes the machine less than an hour to do what it takes humans 60 man-weeks to do every single month. So that idea, that machine learning is being replicated out throughout all the businesses. And that particular use case was for a business that priced their product as a project base, right? They didn't do it time and materials, they did it project-based pricing. We will do this task for X amount of dollars, which means they have instant margin right away, right out of the gate. So it's an easy thing to sell. So when you are building a better mousetrap using artificial intelligence, margin may be the first thing that you can speak to when you're trying to convince people to buy it, or it may be the first thing that you can talk about in terms of value when you're speaking to your investors. So margin and revenue are the first one. The second thing, yeah?
Could you just repeat that? You said that which takes less than 1 hour from the machine learning, and then how many weeks would it normally take the human, that comparison?
Well, in this particular case, it was 60 man-weeks, right? So we had lots of people working on it, right? So essentially we had 20 people working on it for 3 weeks in order to get the same task done.
Do you have slides that breaks that down by domain? So in this, it could be customer service, it could be accounting, it could be medical use cases. You break down this.
I have data that does that for our business, but I'd be shot for giving to. So it's one of those intellectual property things, you know. So
you should have reports. I know Ernst & Young does publish machine learning reports, so that's public.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yes. Just how much we charge and how much time we save in our business. That's not the kind of thing they want to put out there, because I can guarantee you our customers will go, excuse me? Yeah. You do that in an hour? I'd like a refund, right?
Excellent point.
So the other thing that is you can sell on is the fear of missing out. And the fear of missing out comes in a couple of flavors. First and foremost, to the extent that you believe that artificial intelligence gives you an edge, right? You've got something that is the equivalent of legal steroids, right? It gives you the ability to be Lance Armstrong without the negative press, if you can figure out how to utilize these tools. So, if you can do it, your competitor can do it, right? Lance Armstrong's defense has always been, well, everybody was juicing, right? So, everybody in this case can and will be juicing because it's legal, because it's easy, because it makes sense. So there is a fear of missing out that your competitors are going to beat you to the punch. They're going to be able to offer the product quicker, better, faster, cheaper, and you will be out of business. So there is that. There's the second issue is being one of the cool kids, right? Everybody wants to be doing this cool stuff. As Karl said, the board is probably saying, all right, we need to do some stuff in AI, so just do some AI stuff, right? Everybody's probably had that experience when it's like, oh, I know how to do this, we're going to sprinkle some AI pixie dust on it, and it'll be great, right? So that is the other way to deal with it. So greed and fear of missing out, right? Greed on the revenue and margin front, fear of missing out on the competitive advantage and the being part of the cool kids are the ways that I have found to be most effective in getting people to buy into this once I have dealt with the fear issue. The fear issue comes first. You have to watch your audience. You have to know if they're fearful. And if they are fearful, why are they fearful? So that you can address that. Because all of these other things aren't heard if everybody's doing some mental calculation about how soon they're out of a job, how much money they have in their IRA, and what are they going to tell their wife or husband when they go home because a robot wiped them out of work. So you must deal with the fear, then you can get to the sell. And with that, I'm watching the clock. I'm going to stop there and open it up to questions if anybody has it. Yep.
So this is a question about value pricing. So in the case of, let's say, a sophisticated or a savvy purchaser who understands, basically your unit cost is electricity, right? So, after that first conversation about greed and margin, they're really surprised. The second conversation might be, well, you're charging me a 90% margin. What's your counter argument to that?
So fair question. So the answer is that today, without artificial intelligence, the way the job gets done is with humans, with bodies, right? And so when we're having the conversation, we aren't having a conversation that says, hey, we found a way to wipe out 60 man weeks, but we're going to keep charging the same. What we do is we say something to the effect of, and these are made up numbers, but over the last few months, we've been charging you between $50,000 and $57,000 every month, based on the amount of work that you send our way, based on the amount of time it takes us to do the job. But we think that doesn't help you predict your expenses. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you a 10% price reduction and lock it, right? $45,000 every month, no matter how much work you throw our way in this particular situation. We're just going to lock it, we're going to take care of it because we care about you, the customer. We want to make sure that you have predictable expenses. And that's the conversation. Not about how we're going to do our job. The customer's certainly not going to say, oh really, how are you going to make money doing that, right? That doesn't come into the conversation. And that's how you can deal with that issue. Now, eventually, there will become a time when the customer does have another option. They don't right now, right? They can go across the street to PwC and they can say, well, take us 60 man weeks and this is how much we'll charge you. But at some point in time, there's going to be a kid in the garage that says, I'll do that job for $5,000. You're absolutely right. At which point in time, we better be able to do the job for $5,000 or we're going to lose that customer. So at that point in time, we will have to drop our prices if the thing that we're doing becomes commoditized. So we better be
get while the getting's good.
Absolutely. Get while the getting's good, and when things get commoditized, when the price gets driven down because everybody can do it, we're prepared, right? We are doing the Netflix for disruption, not the Blockbuster. All right, any other questions? Yeah?
So I was just wondering about one of the statistics you show, like 5% of jobs, only 5% of jobs can be automated. Is that the actual number of jobs, or is it like the number of types of jobs? For example, like, okay, like 3 types of jobs could be automated, but they could be like 50% of the workforce overall.
Right.
So just curious, like, what that is.
Right, so the question is, when we say 5% of the jobs, are we talking about 100 job titles and 5 job titles are being wiped out, but it's actually 50% of the people doing those 5 job titles? And the answer is no. It is the amount of people, right? The amount of people doing jobs that are wiped out is 5%. Because it's just not a lot of jobs that can be 100% taken over by machines. All right?
When you're going in to allay the fears of the colleagues or people around, what do you do? Do you do like education, or do you like have conversations? Because you said first you need to allay their fears, and then they can present the grade and the FOMO part. So like, how do you reduce the fear?
So in my world right now, the majority of the fear conversations that I'm having are conversations internally, because we're talking about doing things that takes time and materials out of the system, right? And so in this particular case, the main thing we do is we try to understand their business and figure out prescriptively which one of those fears do they care about. If they are project-based, they're not worried about the time and material, right? But they would be worried about utilization, right? So we have to start to think about how do we solve that utilization problem, right? Or if they are worried about the many tasks that their people do, if all of a sudden they lose the jobs that we just automated, how are they going to keep the people that they need for other jobs that can't be automated yet? So our number one thing is to figure out which particular fear they have and go at it head on and address it, and don't even give them the ability to shake us off and pretend that elephant in the room didn't exist. That's how we do it. We talk about the elephant in the room, but we got to figure it out first. Yep.
So you seem to be in the camp of, I guess, Mark Zuckerberg rather than Elon Musk, and you don't see the dystopian era of AI coming anytime soon. For people you talk to who know, what AI is, they're not these board members who don't know what they're talking about AI, right? For those kind of people, how do you address that question that in the long term, AI will take jobs away, do a lot of stuff that humans don't expect, or dangerous stuff, things like that. How do you deal with that in the long term? We just say in the long term we're all dead.
Right. Okay. Well, there's 2 fundamental questions in there. The first one is the job one, right? And the job one is dealt with by the fact that yes, there will be churn, just like there was when automobiles came in place, just like the Industrial Revolution, just like the automated loom. There has always been change. There's always been concern that new ways of doing business will put people out of work, right? Right now there's farms that are completely farmed and seeded by machines. So that's always been there. The thing that's unique right now is people think it's going to happen really fast. Partly because we're on this hype cycle right now, right? They think it's going to happen really, really fast, right? And so the way I answer the question is, it's not going to happen as fast because of all of these governors in the system, right? That is going to put brakes on it. So there will be more time for people to cycle through and retrain and so on. That doesn't mean we won't have some problems, but it's not going to be apocalyptic when we talk about jobs. Now, the other issue that you talked about is, how do we know some missile that's supposed to be heading for North Korea doesn't turn around and hit Washington, D.C., right? That is a little bit more apocalyptic. And of the things that Elon Musk and folks like that are worried about, if unchecked, that could be a problem, right? Just like if we don't pay attention to the biases that we build into AI system, we will have a problem. There's many examples about how if we take machine learning and put in all the resumes and the job scores of people that have worked at like a hedge fund, and then tell the AI system to go out and find the best candidates, all of a sudden, all the people that historically performed well in a patriarchal society where white dudes from Yale who went to DU fraternity always got ahead, all of a sudden, that's all the resumes you get. And the people who are sorting through the resumes don't believe that they're doing anything wrong. They're just like, this is the resumes that are laying on my desk, right? So there is a transparency, there is a ethics, there is a morality that has to be thought of, and that's really what Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking is pointing to, is if you don't design these systems with those ideas in mind, you're gonna F it up big time, and there could be consequences. But I suspect that our nuclear system that still is working on 50-year-old transistors in the launch centers isn't gonna have AI built into it in the very near future. So, I think we might be out of time.
Thank you.
You can contact me here if you like.
Thank you, Stephen. That was great. So I really hope you enjoyed the presentations today. I know there's a lot of thoughts about AI and how do you get there, and this is kind of step zero. You need buy-in, you need people to feel comfortable, or all the technology and neural networks in the world, you will not have a place to do anything with them. So definitely important to think about how we actually make people comfortable with AI, deal with human emotions and all of that before we actually get to the math and all the other parts of it. So I do have a few announcements, and we're doing some more things with our group coming up. We're going to be looking at doing a chatbot, sort of a training session where we're going to have a trainer come in and have you get from nothing to having a Facebook bot. So stay tuned for details. Make sure you sign up on Meetup and Eventbrite to know when that's going on. We're also looking at doing a voice event. So in the future, we're going to get more into that. We're also looking at something with blockchain. So lots of fun stuff that we're going to do before the end of the year. So definitely hope to see you at some of those future events as well.